This week is Pinchas Balak, and one of the most interesting parshiyot in terms of the different ideas and concepts that come up that in terms of hashgacha pratis, divine providence, and also in terms of the anti-Semitism, which in this week's parsha really seems to be anti-Semitism for anti-Semitism's sake. It's as Rashi points out, and Chazal point out, that really Midian and Moab, they weren't even on the map. The Jewish people are approaching Eretz Canaan. They have a mitzvah to get rid of the Canaan, right? The Canaanite people. And that's known. There's a Masorah. The Goyim also know this. The Gentile world also know this is the mandate, this is the agenda. So, Moab and Midian, Midian first of all is down by Egypt. It's already down towards the south. That's where Bilam comes from, and it's not even relevant to him to even get involved in this conflict, except for he has a contract. They put a contract on the Jewish people. Balak hired, first Moab hired Balak, and then Balak hired Bilam. And Moab also was not one of the 7 Canaanite nations. They are where basically Jordan is today, and so they're also not going to be attacked. There's not even a mitzvah to bother them so much, but they go their way. As Rashi points out, that Moab and Midian were actually enemies originally, and kind of like the Americans and the Arabs before 1990, literally enemies and against each other, and they come together to fight against a common enemy, the Jewish people, which is kind of what's happening today a little bit to some degree, and it may even go much further than we know. But they do this for no apparent reason. Why is it just simply to stop the Jewish people? And second of all, it's a suicide mission, because they already saw Sikha and Og, the defense system that was put in place to protect the Canaanite nations, was wiped away. And there was no way to physically overcome these people. So what were they trying to do? They didn't have to. And not only did they not have to, but by doing it, they were putting themselves in complete danger. So it's not good enough just to say it's anti-Semitism, because only Amalek is suicidal. Only Amalek will go out of his way, spend billions of dollars, cross many borders, even though he's not going to be attacked by the Jewish people also, because he's not one of the Canaanite nations either. Only Amalek, as Rashi points out, Parsha Kisei, will jump into the boiling hot bath to scald himself in order to get at the Jewish people. He will destroy himself, send trains to the concentration camps, and sacrifice the war effort just to kill more Jews. That's Amalek. But this is Moab, and this is Midian. So it's not an Amaleki nation per se. So the Zohar comes along and fills in a very important detail that we have to be able to appreciate, and that is, if you take the letters of Balak and you take the letters of Bilam, right, you actually have the word Amalek inside these letters. 4 of the letters of these 7 letters is Amalek. And the Zohar says the reason for this is because both Balak and Bilam came from the same Shorish Elyon, the same upper root in the upper realm as Amalek. So they're actually mushrash, they're actually rooted in Amalek. So they have an Amalek quality to them. So they can't actually endanger themselves. You see, literally, like Bilam is putting himself on the line tremendously just to try and curse the Jewish people and get his money, but mostly probably just to curse the Jewish people to get at them. And it's like twisting, and he's actually working with God here. It's not like today where we rationalize and kind of pretend that God's not looking or God doesn't care. He's actually working directly with God and trying to manipulate the situation to get at the Jewish people. That's an Amalek quality. So that comes from the root of Amalek, which is in Bilam himself, and Balak as well. The Balak also has the same type of reality. And the Shem Shmuel also adds and explains that there was a vested interest also. On a technical, more shot level, there was a vested interest in trying to overcome the Jewish people, even though their countries were not in line to be attacked. Because they knew and understood that the problem was not wiping away the Jewish people. That was not the issue. The Zohar says that if 600,000 males between the age, and the Grobman is down as well, between the ages of 20 and 60, which is what they were at that time, amongst the 3 million Jews that were traveling, the 3 million Erev Rav that was with them, if all 600,000 males had crossed the Jordan River at one time to settle the land together collectively as one nation, that would have brought Mashiach right then and there. That was the final redemption. If the entire Jewish people had crossed over to settle the land at that time, that was the end of history. And that would have brought the Messianic era. So Balak and Bilam knew that. They were aware. These were real sorcerers. These are not like, famous magicians today who have all kinds of magic tricks, sleight of hand, and to fool the eye. But really, they're not usually koiches atum. They're not actually taking part of the real sorcery in the world like Balak and Bilam were able to do. They used real magic. They could use Kabbalah in a negative way, which makes it black magic. Kabbalah is basically taking advantage of the spiritual forces of creation, but in a way that you can be sure is coming from God. Kabbalah makes the connection between the miracle and God. Black magic uses the Kabbalah in a way that takes God out of the picture, that makes it look as if God's not there. And that's the problem with it. And that's why, because it's always been used for evil purposes. So they knew, they understood. And they were aware of this reality, so therefore they were not trying to destroy the Jewish people, says the Shem Shmuel. What they're trying to do instead was they were trying to prevent the entire nation from going into Eretz Israel. That was their whole thing. They couldn't defeat them physically. That they saw from Sichon and Og. They didn't have the merit, the capability, the firepower to stop the Jewish people. What they had to do was keep at least a portion of the nation out of the land, in order to be able to allow the exile to continue. Because as long as the exile could continue, then there's room in the there's room in the world for evil. As long as there's room in the world for evil, there's still room for Balak and Bilam. So Balak and Bilam, even though their nations were not on the list of nations to be conquered by the Jewish people, they knew their time was limited if the Jewish people crossed over the borders. They were being attacked, not physically, but spiritually. So therefore they had to stop the Jewish people from entering and settling in the land, at least a portion of the Jewish people. And even though they're unsuccessful with the cursing part, as Rashi points out later on, Parshas Matos, they are successful in terms of introducing the Banot Midjan later on by Shittim and causing the downfall of the Jewish people, and injecting the Jewish people with a sense of taiva, as it's pointed out in the also Shem Shmuel, and the Pri Tzedek also brings the same idea down as well, that there are three different negative traits in the world, one of which is kina, taiva, and gaiva. Right? Kina is jealousy, taiva is drive for the material, and gaiva is pride. So you have to inject one of these three negative traits into the Jewish people to keep them from crossing the border. So what do you use? Do you use kina, jealousy? No, because you can be just as jealous in Eretz Israel as you can anywhere else in the world. Jealousy is not a factor to keep a person out of the country. There's lots of competition today in Eretz Israel, and lots of jealousy too. Right? Gaiva, right? It's the basis of the Knesset. Basically, it does not, it's not a stira to life in Eretz Israel, unfortunately. In fact, that's the one thing that the Jewish people get criticized for mostly over there, is their gaiva, the excessive pride they might possibly have. But taiva is a different story. The one complaint that people have all the time is you can't get this over there. I just went through Costco, and it's like overwhelming to see what they have on all these shelves. And you're thinking to yourself, well, they don't have things like this back in Eretz Israel, and and the meat, the way the meat's packaged, and all the things that are affordable, the cars, the whole thing. There you pay 100% tax in the car. Here it's like much cheaper. So taiva is something that can keep a Jew out, and does keep a Jew out of Eretz Israel. So therefore they called on Midjan, whose main traits, because in different nations of the world, also embodied different traits. So Midjan's trait was taiva. So by introducing the Banot Midjan, the daughters of Midjan, which comes at the end of the Parsha, into Klal Yisrael, so they became infected with taiva. As a result of that, right, you have later on in Parshas Matos, you have Bnei Reuven, Bnei Gad, and Menashe come, in the Chetzi Shiv of Menashe, come to Moshe Rabbeinu and say to Moshe Rabbeinu, we don't want to go. We like it over here in Avar HaYarden. And there's all kinds of Kabbalah and Midrashim as to what the concept, to try to, to put a little, mask on the whole thing and say it wasn't as bad as it seems to be. Right? There really was L'Shem Shamayim. It was a mistake, but and Moshe goes ballistic. He goes, what are you kidding? Are you guys crazy? You understand that 40 years ago, we've been wandering the desert for 40 years because your ancestors said back then, we don't want to go either, And God says, don't take it personally, Moshe, it's against me. No, Moshe, sir, no. Moshe's my son. Moshe, right? Don't take it personally, Moshe, because it's against me in the end. And let them have it, let them stay, and it's a disaster. Even though he gives in and tells them what to do, and not just that, but when they say, first we'll build cities for our animal, or we'll build pens for animals and cities for our wives and children, and then we'll go to war. And Moshe says, no, first you build things for your family, and then you build for the animal. Their priorities are all mixed up. Where did this come from all of a sudden? So this comes from Bilam. This is the Eitzah, the advice that Bilam gave to Balak, and brought the Benot Midjan down, and injected Taiva into the Jewish people. And the Medrash says that the moment that Bnei Reuven, Gad, and Menashe came and complained to Moshe Rabbeinu and asked to stay in Avar HaYarden, on the east side of the Jordan River, that was the beginning of Galus Bavel. That was the beginning of the very first exodus. They haven't even crossed the border yet. They haven't even conquered the land yet. They haven't built the base of Mikdash yet. And already the first exile is beginning over here by the story of Bnei Reuven, Gad, Menashe. Because why? 600,000 people did not cross over to settle the land. They came over to fight, but they came on a pilot trip. Right? They weren't coming, to make aliyah over here. They were coming to test the waters, to see what's going on over here, and go back again. So there was never a connection. So the mandate of the Zohar, of 600,000 people living at one time to bring Mashiach, didn't happen. So that was the beginning of the Galus 850 years earlier than it actually took place. So you go back to the words Balak and Bilam once again, and you have Amalek, and what are the three letters left over? Base, Lamed, Bavel. The first exile. That was their whole drive. That was their whole way of thinking, right? That was the way that they precipitated, because they understood as long as they can keep the Jewish people in exile. And they weren't just talking back then. They were talking all through history. What's going on today, the number one ikuv, the number one obstacle of Jews even considering making aliyah, interesting enough, people don't say so much, well, it's such a scary place to be because, today maybe perhaps with Iran, but prior to Iran, in the situation, people didn't bring up the security issue. People send their kids to yeshiva in Eretz Israel to this very day, and seminary. Either they don't like their children and looking to get rid of them somehow along the way, or it's because they believe it's a safe place to be, and they come visit. And they spend time there, and the tourism is booming, and people are making aliyah at a state of history that really you think otherwise they wouldn't come because it's so dangerous at this time for ideological reasons. But people don't bring up the issue of security so much. They bring up instead the issue of parnasa, the issue of, I have a house here, there I can't, I have clothing here, we can buy it because we require it. It's almost all gashmistic type of things. That's the main ikuv. I come back to visit, to Toronto or other cities, and the first thing you see, the houses and the cars, and it's not the lifestyle. Baruch Hashem, people there also have houses and cars too, but it's not to the same extent that you have it over here. And that's what people are attached to. They're rooted in here, and it's always in the problem of Jewish exile. That's why it says that Yaakov went down to Mitzrayim to sojourn, just to dwell down there. What if he was there for 100 years? It doesn't make a difference. Wherever a Jew goes outside of Eretz Israel, you're only supposed to go to sojourn, to be there temporarily. Even if you're there for 1,000 years, the mentality has to be, we're just passing through. It's not the final destination in the end. So that's what Balak and Bilam were able to do. That's what Balak and Bilam did to the Jewish people. We are in exile today, and Mashiach is not here today, and we're suffering all that we're suffering today as a nation, as anti-Semitism increases geometrically on a daily basis, monthly basis for sure, is because of Balak and Bilam. The Amalek part of them. They put themselves on the line. They're prepared to destroy themselves in order to be able to get at the Jewish people. That's the Amalek part. What do they facilitate? The extension of the exile of the Jewish people, which resulted in the first exile into Babel and all the subsequent exiles after that until this very day. So we're still at war with Amalek. We're still at war with Balak and Bilam. We're still feeling the effects thousands of years down the road. That's the first part. The second part is interesting. It's an insight that comes about life in general from Bilam, and really for that matter from Paro too. Because it's a very, we make a big deal about it. We've mentioned in our tefillas, mentioned in a few places how Kodesh Baruch Hu took the klalos of Bilam and turned them around, turned them over, and not only did not prevent, like Haman for example, HaKadosh Baruch Hu only prevented Haman from carrying out his plan. He didn't make Haman give us confidence. He didn't make Haman come and say, you know something, instead of destroying you, let me build you a city. Let me build you, a palace someplace. He just simply took Haman out of the picture. But by Bilam, he goes much, much further. He takes Bilam and says, not only will you not be able to curse the Jewish people, you're even going to go one step further, a big step further, to get an enemy to bless Klal Yisrael. As Rashi points out from the brachos, you can see what the klaus were supposed to be. The question is, and the same thing applies by Paro. Paro does a very bizarre thing. He doesn't say to Moshe Rabbeinu, okay, you can go. He says, Chatasi, right? Avisi, Pashati, I made a mistake. I erred, I sinned, you're right. God's a tzaddik, right? And I'm an evil guy. I made a mistake, and now you can go. The question is, why did Bilam bless the Jewish people? Why was he forced to do so? Why did we have to not just take his klala and make it the bracha? Why couldn't we just stop and just not make it a klala at all? Why did Paro have to go this extra distance and say, not only can you go out and serve your God, but I was wrong? Why must he go the extra distance? Because Baruch Hu simply forced him? It was more like, I sinned, and you're a good guy, and I'm the bad guy. Like really compelling him, like Bilam saying, I really want to curse these people, but okay, good, God's, making my mouth make brachos instead. When someone is being compelled to do something against their will, you can see it in their face. You can see the strain. Bilam doesn't do that. Bilam not only comes out and blesses Klal Yisrael, but as Rashi points out in the parsha, he gets Ruach Elokim, he gets a vision, he sees things, and it goes up in his mind to give them a bracha. He himself is masking to give them a bracha. Normally he wouldn't be, and we can't understand it. Why? Because how does a Rasha go from being a Rasha to kind of like a tzaddik temporarily? He goes back to being a Rasha again later on. But in the meantime, he goes the distance of being a tzaddik. How does Paro go to such extremes? And what's the mechanism? What's HaKadosh Baruch Hu using over here? So it's a very important insight, because we would say, well, that's Bilam. Has nothing to do with me or the Jewish people. That's a Paro. Has nothing to do with me or the Jewish people. But the truth is, the reality is, it has everything to do with me and the Jewish people, because the Gemara tells us, right, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Gemara in Kedusha and Lamed Amud Beis tells us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I created the Yetzer Hara, and I created the Torah as its tavlin, as its spice. Right? So you could come back and say, don't create the Yetzer Hara, and don't give us the Torah. Just let us be normal. Just be passive, neutral over here. So the answer, of course, is that no, because the point of living in this world is to go to the world to come. To go to the world to come, as the Ramchal points out, you have to earn your schar to get there. To earn your schar, you have to have free will, and to have free will, you have to have Yetzer Hara. But the Yetzer Hara is a very powerful thing, and because Yetzer Hara is so powerful, because Baruch Hu gives us Siyata D'Shmaya, he gives us heavenly help by giving us Torah and the Tavlin. What does it mean that Torah is the Tavlin? Why is Torah a Tavlin the Yetzer Hara? Right? So we know already one aspect of it, because the Gemara in Yuma says that Chazal in the time of the second base of Mikdash, when they saw that the drive for Avodah Zarah was so strong, they were mispalel to take it away. They did. They were successful. No more drive for Avodah Zarah. We all go, why? These guys are so crazy. They went after wood and stones and things like that. As Menashe once told in a dream to one of the Tanoim, had you lived in my time, you would have picked up the hem to run after me to chase the Avodah Zarah that I was chasing after. We don't appreciate that, because it was taken away. So we have no drive for stone and wood and idols, just for cars and money. But it's a different Yetzer Hara, it's a different Avodah Zarah over here, right? But they took it away. So the Gemara says, they thought, okay, well, we're kind of on a roll over here. Let's make it really easy, and we'll take away the drive for Gil Yarias, for illicit relationships. And as the Gemara points out, which is, for some it's famous, the Gemara says they couldn't find an egg anywhere in the country for a chola. Right? The chickens weren't mating. And kol v'chomer, the humans weren't mating. Husbands would go to the base medrash and stay there. They'd move in. They wouldn't have any desire to go home and have children to procreate. Likewise by the women as well. There was no desire. So the Gemara says that they mispalel that enough of the drive came back that marriage could still exist and still have children, but to reduce at least ancestral relationships. So it was also reduced to a large degree amongst mankind. So what's the Gemara telling us? The Gemara is telling us, of course, the most important sort of life, and that is Yetzer Hara, as evil as it's made up to be, as difficult as it may be for functioning, it serves two purposes. It can serve the wrong purpose, but it can serve the right purpose. It needs to be channeled. Without it, you do nothing. But you require it even for the sake of mitzvah, right? So when it says the Torah was made as a tavling, it's telling you the Torah was given to mankind to allow him to channel the Yetzer Hara, right? That's what the actual channel the Yetzer Hara in the proper direction it has to go. So it's not just such an evil thing, but you have to channel. So how does it work? How do you channel the Yetzer Hara? How does Torah allow a person to channel the Yetzer Hara? So that's what this week's parsha is all about. Basically, the way that it works, and for that you can basically explain it using a famous halacha by the Rambam in Hilchos Yesodei Torah, and he asked the question over there: how does one come to fear and love God? Is it mitzvah d'oraisa to fear God and to love God? How do you do it? What's the question? You simply love God. So Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg Zatzal once explained the Rambam was bothered by a philosophical question, and that is, how do you command an emotion? I can command you to put on tefillin. It's an act, because you can do tefillin whether you like it or you don't like it, whether you understand it or you don't understand it. It's a physical act. You have to keep Shabbos. But emotions are things that develop, right? Emotions are things that you have to, after a period of time. You don't simply love someone the first day you go out with them, right? So how can you love HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the spot? So therefore, the Rambam says the mitzvah is not to love God per se, but the mitzvah is to do that which will result in love of God. Because you have to love God eventually, but you can't command an emotion, or to hate Amalek for that matter. So therefore, he said the mitzvah is to do that which result in love of God. So therefore, he says, go out into the world and contemplate the world, and when you see the awesomeness and the chesed of Ma'aseh Bereshis, he says, miyad, you will come to love God. That's what he says. So Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg, he said, why, he asked the question, why did the Rambam feel compelled to put the word miyad inside the halacha? He says, if you do this, immediately you will come to love God. Just say, if you do this, you will come to love God. Enough. That was the halacha, that was the question, that's the answer. Why did he feel compelled to add the word miyad immediately? Right? So the Rambam explains, a beautiful yesod, at least Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg explained this, he said to us, and he said that the Rambam is telling you something even deeper. He's telling you the reason why the mitzvah is not to love God per se is because, like anything else we do naturally, you don't have to be commanded. There's no commandment to breathe. There's no commandment to eat. Things that we do naturally, we don't need a mitzvah for. Love of God is an automatic human reality. To be made in the presence of the image of God, and to be in the presence of God, a person automatically is going to have love of God. It's there. But it's like water being dammed up, in a river, right? There's a dam that blocks the flow. The water wants to flow downstream, but the beavers have built a dam to block the water from going down. The water is pushing against the dam, but it can't break through because the dam is so strong. So the Rambam is saying, if you don't love God, it's not because the love of God doesn't exist inside you, because automatically when someone does a tova for you, when someone gives you good, when someone's nice to you, they take care of you, they provide you with life, all kinds of wonderful things, automatically you want to bond with them. You reach out to them. Even a stranger, you reach out to them. So he says, go outside and see the world Hashem has made for you. Love of God is going to be automatic. It's a reality that you can't escape. So then why don't I feel love of God? He says, because the Yetzer Hara dams it up. How does he do it? With negativity. He makes you focus on the negative things. He drowns you in a negative perspective. He makes it that you cannot see the good in life. With all the news and the media, the problems, he gets your children to act up, he gets your parnasa to slow down. Whatever he can do to make the negativity more pronounced until you're so distracted away from the good, the love of God gets dammed up. So he says, how do you get around this? You have to beat the Yetzer Hara at his own game. You have, the same way he creates a big distraction, you have to create an even bigger one with good. He says, go outside and contemplate the awesomeness of the world. Go take a look at the Grand Canyon. Take a look at the Har Yehuda versus Israel. Take a look at the miracles of Jewish history. Take a look at whatever the miracle of life. Take a look at the Parnasa. Whatever you can, focus on the amazing good, and then eventually what happens is the evil, the bad, becomes small compared to that. It's like removing the dam, and he says automatically the love will flow. Just flows. Take away the Yetzer Hara, and immediately, because it's already there, it's always already there. Take away the Yetzer Hara, and truth resides. Truth overcomes. That's what he says. That's a beautiful, remarkable insight in Chiddush of the Rambam from one word. Right? Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg, he was very good at that. To point out from one word in Rashi, where the Rambam, a phenomenal insight and concept that opens up everything, which also answers our question too. What happened to Paro was not that the Kadosh Baruch Hu let him keep his old perspective, but just made the words come out differently from his mouth and against his will. So he was like grinding his teeth. I don't want to say this right now, but God's making me do it. Right? And Bilam's saying, oh, I would love to curse these people, but can I do? God's compelling me. And it's not that way. The Torah makes a point of that by showing you they're actually into this. They bless, they see, as Rashi points out, they see things. His eyes opened. His perspective has changed. Why? Because for a moment, enough of a moment necessary for these brachas, HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes away Bilam's Yetzer Hara. He's Masalat kids. And in Paro too, for that moment he says, it's like taking with the blindfold. If he didn't do that, they would still see the negative thing and never appreciate what they did, which is less painful. Because basically, as long as you can hold on to your own philosophy, you can rationalize and justify and change nothing. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to make it so crystal clear and painful for them, he allows them temporarily to see how folly their way of thinking is. He shows them the situation as it exists from a divine perspective. At that point in time, Paro's overwhelmed. Wow, I really did blow it. I really did make a mistake. Chatasi, Pshati, I did Avisi, and you're the tzaddik, and you gotta go up. And then he puts it back in, right? And since it's so powerful, and it's so poisonous, he can't overcome it again on his own. He tastes it, but he can't overcome it. He goes right back to the way he was before, like Bilam as well. Right? For that moment in time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, now let me show you the Jewish people and Jewish history as I see it. And then Bilam says, Halavai, I should die a death like this. I should die the death of the righteous. What are you talking? You're a Russian. What are you saying about yourself? How can you compare yourself and say, I should die like they're going to die and be great like they are at the end? You don't like them. If you want to be like them, join them. You didn't join them because you don't like them. So why all of a sudden are you comparing yourself? The answer is because now I see who they are. Now I see what they are. Now I see what they're going to get at the end of history. Boy, it's unbelievable. Have I made a mistake? I wanted to curse these people. Now I just want to bless them and bless them and bless them, even though it's not who I was up until now. And the moment the bracha is over and it's finished, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, now take your Yetzer Hara back. And he puts it back inside of them. And they go back to being who they were before. Because you have to earn that. And that's what the Torah does. Because Baruch Hu gave us, the Gemara says, for example, if a person says to you, he says, Yagati lo matzati al tamim. A person works in Torah and they didn't accomplish, don't believe it. If they worked, not they simply learned. They picked up words, they picked up ideas, they laid a daf of Gemara. Not simply that. Yagati. Yagati means that it was Magia, I worked hard on myself to integrate the Torah. The Gemara is telling you it's impossible on that level to be exposed to this truth that's so pristine and not have the Yetzer Hara disappear. That's how Torah is a tabling for the Yetzer Hara. The Torah provides a perspective, like going out into the world and looking at the sun and the moon, the stars, and appreciating what Hashem has done with Ma'aseh Bereshis to overcome the evil, to bring back the love. It's the same idea. Torah as a spice means that I will now, through Torah, give you a vision that's godly, that will allow you to rise up. And of course, the deeper you go into Torah, the more this is going to be true, right? Pardes, Pshat, Ramiz, Drush, and Sod. And so Sod reveals things. It gets to a point on the level of Sod, you're basically having a Yetzer Hara is irrelevant. Irrelevant. Because the truth is so crystal clear. There's no more room for any rationalization. And that's what happened to Moshe Rabbeinu. The point of free will is to get to the point where you no longer need your free will. To keep making choices to bring you more and more clarity, so eventually the clarity is so clear, you can't lie to yourself anymore. You can't rationalize anymore. You learn from Bilam in this week's Parsha the power of a Masalik Yetzer Hara, of taking it away. Once you take it away, you are a tzaddik automatically. Automatically. So it's a very interesting remark. To finish off, the ties up very nice with the beginning of the Parsha too. We spoke about how they try to keep the Jewish people out of Eretz Yisrael. So the Ramak says, Moshe Cordovero says, he says that among the many schuyot living in Eretz Yisrael, which is one of the reasons why Bilam and Balak were worried. So because as long as the Jewish people lived in the chutzlarts, they lived in the diaspora, if they did a chet, it accounted. And it accounted as a chov, as an obligation, required kapara, atonement, and shuv, and all these different things. But as the Tuva Arts brings down, based upon the Arizal, the land of Eretz Yisrael is machaper for a Jew 24/7. As long as you're not doing the chet, because you know that, as I will do the chet because the land will atone for me, the land will atone for you. You're doing it, do the best you can based upon who you are to be the best person you can. But the land is machaper 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And every 7 years, through the Shemitah, it releases all the sins of the Jewish people. It's cleansed, it's clean, and also the mitzvahs of Trumas and Meisers and all the mitzvahs that are dependent upon the land. They have to release those averas from the land itself. But the land itself absorbs the averas. It's brought down. So the Ramak says, he says that's why it says, the pasuk says, Zeh Shar Hashem Tzadikim Yavo, right? This is the Shar of Hashem that Tzadikim will pass through. What's the Shar of Hashem? He says Eretz Yisrael, because Yaakov used those words in Parshas Vayetze in his dream, and therefore Shar Hashem refers to Eretz Yisrael, the Shar Shemayim, Shar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? Tzadikim Yavo. He says based upon that anybody who lives in Eretz Yisrael has a Shem Tzaddik. They automatically have the appellation of being a Tzaddik. They get that title, Tzaddik so-and-so. So the first time I saw that, I thought to myself, well, I'm thinking to myself, Ben Yehuda Street, Dizengoff Street, how could you call these people Tzaddikim? Okay, maybe Tzaddik v'nishba, but how Tzaddikim in the end? The next thing he says, Afilu, hu niru kamo rasha, even though he appears like an evil person in your eyes, from Hashem's perspective, he has a Shem Tzaddik. How can that possibly be? Because the land is machaper 24/7. With all the there is being done. There's not one Jew, I'm sure, in the entire land today, on Dizengoff Street, on Ben Yehuda Street, or downtown Sfat, wherever that you'll find Jews doing things the Torah says for sure you shouldn't do. And even amongst the religious community, there are mistakes being made, and sins requiring atonement. But nobody is saying, I will do this chet, because the land will atone for me. They're not doing that. So therefore the land's atoning for Klal Yisrael all the time. Balak and Bilam knew that koyach. They knew the koyach in the land itself, that the land could do a thing like that. So therefore they said, as long as we keep Jewish people in the Midbar, and they're out here doing chatayim, Hashem can get angry at them. He can punish them like what happened to the 24,000 died from the tribe of Shimon, this week's parsha, because of B'nai Midjan. He'll do that. But if they cross the border, then only will it become a messianic era. But the land itself will atone for the sins of Klal Yisrael, and there'll be no room for the likes of Balak and Bilam in the world anymore. And that was the war they waged back then, and that's the war that's being waged against the Jewish people all through history until this very day. And that's what we're fighting for. And that's why today, more than ever, we have to appreciate these lessons of Eretz Yisrael and the lessons of the Parsha and apply them and realize that's who we are. And by doing that, not only make amends for the mistakes that were made back then, but also to make amends for the mistakes being made today, and that becomes the basis of the survival and the salvation of Klal Yisrael.